welcome to Need to Know Space. We are coming live from the Farnborough Space Show, and today I want to talk a little bit about propulsion. So let's just keep it nice and simple. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Okay, that's not so simple, is it? What that means is if you want a rocket to go up, something has got to be pushing it and going in the opposite direction. Now, I'm pleased to be joined by Thomas Clayson from Magdrive.
Thank you.
We're going to get on to some of your work in a little while, but I'm going to just rack the brains and get all of the information about propulsion. So,
sure.
We want our rocket to go to space. How do we create the thrust to get it off the planet?
Yeah, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head. If rocket goes one way, other things must go the other way. So a rocket is actually expelling a large amount of gas. That is the exhaust material. That goes down, and that forces the rocket back up. Now, in the case of like a launch vehicle, which is what you're talking about to get off the surface of the planet, you are burning a large amount of material. You know, like 90% of the rocket is just fuel that is burnt to get the tiny little bit of payload up into space.
And what kind of fuels can you use?
So for launch, you want something which gives you a lot of thrust because you need a lot of force very quickly. So it's all chemical stuff which is used. However, compared to say a jet engine or a car, there's no air in space, so you actually have to bring your own oxygen with you. So you have two components, effectively. So you have your fuel, which is either kerosene, which is the same as jet fuel, or like methane is a more modern fuel, which is being used by like the Raptor engine in the Starship. And then you have what's called the oxidizer. Now in an airplane, that's just the air, but in rockets you have to bring that with you, and that will typically be oxygen.
So you've already kind of answered my second question was, does it differ on the ground or, kind of sea level to being in space? You said it does. But would you use the same fuel mix or would you change it as long as you bring
No, that's a really good point.
with you?
So what I've talked about thus far is all launch vehicles. That's literally a very short period of like a spacecraft's lifetime. It's the first 10 minutes or so. Once you're in space, it's quite different because now you need your materials, your fuel and your oxidizer, or in our case, we don't use that, we use just propellant, to last a very long time. So you're not going to use like liquid oxygen really, because that will boil off. Instead, if you're using a chemical rocket, you'll typically use chemicals like hydrazine, which are they have better lifetime, but they kill.
Nasty.
Yeah, they're kind of they're a neurotoxin, right? Yeah, so they're not great, but they have some benefits. So those chemicals are usually less performant as well, which is another issue. But they are very challenging to use. I mean, the industry uses what they call green propellants, which are kind of anything but. They're still very poisonous, still very bad. So there's a big shift in the industry to move towards electric propulsion, which is kind of where I come in. Now, chemical propulsion is good because it gives you a lot of thrust, gives you a lot of power very quickly.
And you need that to
So
launch in the
for
first
launch, you need that. But once you're in space, you don't actually need that so much because now you're in a stable orbit around the Earth. You're going to stay there for many months. There is a very small amount of atmosphere, so your orbit will decay. But you do need propulsion, but you don't need anywhere near what you need for a launch vehicle. So you don't usually need chemical. Instead, you can get away with a lot less force. So those smaller chemical engines are okay, but there's an increasing interest in electric propulsion. And there, you're not burning material. Instead, you're using electrical power, so that's coming from your solar panels initially, to accelerate a plasma to a very, very high velocity. And so the way to think about this is like a gun, okay? We're in the UK, so we know less about guns, I guess. But if you have a small caliber like pistol, you get a little bit of recoil, okay? Because your bullet's traveling at a certain speed, I don't know. But if you have like some crazy high velocity sniper rifle, you get a lot more recoil. Basically, you're getting a lot more force. So if you're able to accelerate that exhaust material, that gas, to a much higher velocity, you get a lot more bang for your buck. So we call that, the measure of that is specific impulse, but you can think of it as miles per gallon. Now with electric propulsion, you're going to get a far, far higher, it's about 10 times improvement in your miles per gallon because your exhaust material is just going so much faster.
But we still can't get to Mars quickly, can we? How are we going to solve that? I mean, that seems to be one of the key things. I'm happy to go into space. I would love to go to the ISS. I'd love to go to the moon. 3 days there, a few days on the moon, come back. That's a perfect 2-week holiday. But Mars, we're talking like 8 months to get there.
Yes.
So what is it that we're missing in the propulsion stakes that could get us further and faster?
Yeah, so getting to Mars is a challenge. I mean, there's a bit of a maybe myth that like, oh, we got to the moon, so Mars is just around the corner. No, Mars is really far away. It's way further than the moon. Much easier to get to the moon than Mars. So using chemical rockets, it takes months. That's more of like just an orbital dynamics issue than anything else. And like electric propulsion will probably take a lot longer, like potentially years. Because there the limit is how quickly you can generate power. Now there are high power electric propulsion systems such as Magdrive, which might be able to do that a lot faster with like things like nuclear reactors instead of solar panels. But typically, yeah, it's going to take many months. There are some more advanced concepts which unfortunately are quite far off, like nuclear engines, like nuclear fusion engines. I mean, we haven't yet got nuclear fusion working on Earth, so they've got to get that working in space. So a lot of development needed there, but that could potentially do it a lot quicker. But it's really, really far away. Is kind of the answer.
Okay, so Magdrive, you're not interested in launching rockets off the planet, but you're interested in moving vehicles around or keeping them in stable orbits up in space. So tell me a bit about the fuel you use and how that works.
Yeah, so it's not technically fuel because we're not actually getting any energy from our propellant. It's propellant. So we still have to shoot material out that way to go this way. So we're shooting out plasma. Initially, that plasma is stored as solid metal. So we use copper in our current thrusters inside the Magdrive Rogue. That is then very rapidly, over the course of like less than a millionth of a second, vaporized and ionized to produce a high temperature, low density gas, which is a plasma. And that's ejected at tens of kilometers per second out of the back, causing your rocket to go in the other direction.
And what's sparking that reaction?
So our system is an electrical system. We have what's called a pulse power system. So we store up a small amount of energy at a high voltage, and we charge these capacitors over the course of milliseconds, and then we discharge them very, very rapidly, produce these extremely fast pulses, which are used to vaporize metal into a plasma.
Okay, so if it's pulses, you can actually control. It's not like a solid rocket booster where once you switch it on, it's going and it doesn't care about you.
That's one of the benefits of electric propulsion, and doubly so with Magdrive, is that improved controllability. So yeah, I mean, if you're using solid rockets, you light it and get the hell out of there because it's not stopping. Chemical propellants also quite challenging. You usually only have a few reignites. Like a very famous example is the lunar ascent rocket to get the astronauts, the Apollo astronauts, back from the moon to off the lunar surface. That rocket could only be fired once, so it could not be tested before they used it. Yeah, they put a lot of faith in that.
Really did.
Exactly. Fortunately, we don't have that problem. With electric propulsion, we're able to turn it on and off pretty much as we see fit, and that's ideal because when we're in space, we're not talking about a short event like launch or like a lunar injection or anything. We're talking about sustained operations for multiple years. So you're going to be needing to do lots and lots of different maneuvers to maintain your orbit, to avoid collisions, and in the future, look at these new business models around satellites coming together, rendezvousing, docking, building things. That's what we're really passionate about and what we're really excited about enabling.
And is electric propulsion already being used in space, or is this something that you've come up with that's new?
So Magdrive, which is a variant of electric propulsion, is brand new. However, there are other electric propulsion systems. There's Hall effect thrusters, ion thrusters, and various other variants. They've been used for quite a while. The technology is quite old, really. Like the last time we had a real breakthrough in electric propulsion, except for Magdrive, was back in the 70s. So, we've had a lot of innovation in launch. Like, we have reusable rockets. It's cheaper than ever to get to launch. People are just throwing things up there right now, which is also a problem. But once we're up there, there's not really been much innovation. It's still very challenging to maneuver around. So what's ended up happening is we've had this dichotomy where you have chemical systems, which give you a lot of agility, so you have a high thrust, but very low miles per gallon, very low specific impulse.
Right, so you have to take quite a lot, and then you've got all the mass.
Yeah. So a good example is like a geostationary spacecraft will be 80% propellant by mass.
Wow.
Yeah, and so launch mass 5 tons. When it gets to actual orbit, it's about 1 ton. That's a very long distance it's going.
Yeah.
And you kind of build your spacecraft around your propulsion tank, which is not ideal as well.
So could you swap that out for?
Exactly. So electric propulsion, however, gives you the inverse of that. You have very high specific impulse, factor of 10 improvement, but a very, very low thrust, which means that there's a lot of maneuvers which either take a very long time to do or you just flat out cannot do because you don't have the agility. What Magdrive is offering is something which gives you the same efficiency, the same specific impulse or miles per gallon, but at a much, much higher level of thrust. Not quite as high as chemical, mind, but sufficient to do the entire complement of a spacecraft's maneuvers. So we can do very rapid collision avoidance maneuvers. We can do close proximity operations.
It's getting more and more important these days with all the
It
space
is. Yeah, I have some fun stats. I love stats. I'm a scientist. So from Sputnik, spacecraft number 1, till 2015, we launched about 7,000 spacecraft as a species. In the last 10 years, so 2015 to 2025, we launched 7,000 more.
Wow.
By 2030, we'll be launching 7,000 per year.
Yeah, most of those will just be Starlink.
A good number of Starlink, but Starlink are not the only guys chasing mega constellations. There's like OneWeb, there's Kuiper, there's like a dozen Chinese firms which are going to be putting mega constellations up there. There's a lot of activity going on. And, Douglas Adams says, space is big, but actually these spacecraft are kind of all going to the same place, and that is the problem. It's a very thin shell around the Earth. So we have gone from a scenario where we're doing a collision avoidance maneuver, that's how these spacecraft are hurtling towards one another, and you'll know usually like multiple orbits, maybe a couple of days in advance, that your collision might happen, and there's a probability, and if the probability is too high, you do
Something about it.
Yeah, you do something about it. You get out of the way, right? But we used to do that maybe once a year. We're doing it every month now.
Okay. So that could use up a lot of propellant.
It does, exactly. So if you're using a chemical system where you have a limited amount of propellant, because you have that very low miles per gallon, that's a real problem. Now, as we're operating in this new regime where we're going to be going to do that every week, maybe once a day, that's just completely unfeasible. And if we want to keep using space as we have been using it and as we benefit from it, we all benefit from space. We all use space-enabled devices. We need a breakthrough in propulsion. We need something new, and that's what Magdrive offers. We offer that higher specific impulse, so that higher miles per gallon, which enables you to do that high cadence, that repeated maneuver, but it's fast enough that we can do it very rapidly. Now that's important because it means that, firstly, there are times when a electric propulsion system may not be fast enough to respond. That's going to be even more of a problem when you very much run the risk of moving into the path of someone else as you move.
So would you have a hybrid with part chemical and
Well,
part electric?
some people have looked at that, but then you don't have the high specific impulse with the chemical, and you've increased the mass of your spacecraft, you've increased the cost, the complexity, whereas we can do it with one system. So yeah, we can do that collision avoidance maneuver very rapidly. So that's great because that's needed sometimes. It means that you're not going to stray into the path of someone else. And it also means that it takes less time away from your actual revenue generating activities. Because remember, space is now a commercial endeavor, and people need to be able to use these spacecraft to actually do useful things for people on Earth.
So it sounds great. I mean, does it work? Have you tested it?
Yeah.
Why is this brand new, and why isn't everybody using it already?
Well, they will be very soon. So we have our first launch, 2 thrusters going up this summer. Launching June 2025. So very excited about that. They were delivered and integrated back in January, so about 3 months ago, 2 months ago, I guess.
What's the mission? Is it what
So-
kind of size satellite? is it?
So it's actually a very large spacecraft. It's about like big like American-style washing machine.
Okay.
It's like 200 odd kilograms. It's a deorbit ion spacecraft, and we have 2 thrusters on there. Tiny thrusters moving that big spacecraft. Very exciting. We're like the mighty little thruster. We're very excited about that. So that's going up very soon, and then we're moving into actually looking at how we produce these and deliver these as a commercial company. So working with future customers, both in Europe and out in the US.
And is this something that you would sell as a thruster that people could just add on to an existing design of spacecraft, or would they have to, completely redesign the way they do their satellites?
So a little bit of both. So spacecraft, maybe first backing up a little bit, talk about how we design and build spacecraft. So spacecraft operators don't usually produce most of the components. They'll usually just buy everything in, and then their job is to glue them all together. Usually they use better the glue bolts, I guess, and then operate the spacecraft. So they'll buy solar panels from one guy, they'll buy comms from someone else, and hopefully propulsion from us, and then they'll attach them all together. Now, typically you will define propulsion at the beginning of your mission because it is one of the most important parts. And it's very challenging because, as I previously said, you end up kind of building your spacecraft around the propulsion system. So what ends up happening is you have this iterative process where you'll design your mission ops, spec your propulsion in the rest of your spacecraft, and go, oh, actually we can't achieve those mission ops, let's modify those. Then you go around this loop until it starts converging, a very lengthy and time-consuming process. With our system, it's a very compact thruster, and it's a very modular thruster, so we're able to shorten that entire process. So you can go, oh, I just need more propulsion, increase it. So you can go like, I don't want 4 modules, I now want 6.
Okay.
And then you can get a little bit extra performance to achieve your actual mission aims. But yeah, so our business model is to be propulsion providers. We want to sell them to other people that will build and operate spacecraft. We want to be the facilitators that enable them to do the really exciting stuff. So initially, that sort of constellation management. So when we want to just keep those spacecraft doing important things in orbit. But the real greenfield, the really exciting stuff that keeps us awake at night and which we're really excited about, is this new emerging industry, which is right about cusping, which is called in-orbit servicing and manufacturing. I think it has a slightly different acronym in the US. And this is the idea of spacecraft rendezvousing, docking, servicing one another, building large structures in space, refueling, repairing, making things in space for use on Earth. And frankly, propulsion just needs to get better to enable that. So we need something which is both agile and efficient, which is exactly our ball game, right? We need something which is agile to be able to maneuver around assets which can cost hundreds of millions. You need to be very responsive. You need to be able to
reliable.
You need reliable. You need to be able to maneuver without hitting them. You also need something efficient because you've got to be able to visit multiple targets to make your business model make sense. Like a truck which delivers one thing and then you throw a truck away is not really a business model. Exactly. So that's what Magdrive aims to provide, one propulsion system which does that entire ecosystem. And we want to enable what will be basically a large ecosystem, a large economy based in space about building large structures for multiple uses, so big factories for producing things in space, big solar collectors to collect power and microwave it back to Earth, big science instruments, James Webb Space Telescope, great example, right? Incredibly expensive and delayed because of that complex folding mechanism.
Which was amazing.
It's very cool, but that was for 8 minutes of its life.
Yes.
That was just to get it inside the launch vehicle. Why did that requirements change everything about that mission? In the future, we would build such a system in space, and we'd be able to build a mirror 10 times the size and be able to see, right into when galaxies were first forming and deep into the Big Bang and stuff. That'd be really, really cool. Or maybe even image exoplanets properly, which would be very exciting. So these are all new things which are about to happen, and it's building stuff in space which is going to be one of the enablers. And for that, we need better propulsion. We need to be able to maneuver around safely, securely, and efficiently to make those business models make sense.
Now, I know the UK has always been good at robotics, we've been good at small satellite manufacturing. With Magdrive, are we now on the cusp of becoming a leading nation in propulsion?
I'd like to think so. Yes, and I'm hoping to make it so. It's as I said, there's a lot of different electric propulsion systems out there, but moving around in space really is not a solved problem. There's a lot of room for disruption, and I think we have some really exciting technology which is going to enable a lot of new business cases.
So we'll be watching out for the launch in a few months' time. Where can we find out more?
Well, if you go to our website, www.magdrive.space, you can find more details on there, including some of our latest coverage from journalists, and I'm sure we'll post this video up there, which should be quite fun.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for unravelling some of the difficulty with propulsion, and we wish you all the very best for your launch.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much.